All right, you guys. Last part. Pages 494 to 499. So this has to do with understanding bureaucracies. And if you notice on my outline here, we've got bureaucracy and democracy being the main point all the way down. This is the very end here. So just to keep in mind, this is pretty much what we're going to be talking about. How do bureaucracies work in a democracy? All right, so first off is that in a democratic theory, popular control of government depends on elections, but we could not elect all of the bureaucrats, the 4 million plus federal, civilian, and military employees. That would be insane. So just to keep that in mind. And the fact that voters do not elect civil servants does not mean, let me go like that bureaucracies cannot respond to and represent the public's interests. So again, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. These people are oftentimes blamed for all that goes wrong, but they're doing a lot of good for things that people really do care about. So much depends on whether bureaucracies are effectively controlled by their policymakers that citizens do elect. So that would be your president and then your congressmen and women. So presidents try to control or impose their policy preferences on agencies using some of the following methods. So first, they try to appoint the right people to head the agency. Putting their people in charge is one good way for presidents to influence agency policy. So again, they're very careful with their selections, especially of the cabinet level positions, because then those people are going to be hiring a lot of people under them. So that's a really an important role. And with Joe Biden's cabinet that you guys looked at, you can see that we have cabinet level positions such as the head of environmental, I think it's the EPA. I can't remember the exact title, but you guys looked at that in class. All right. Another way presidents try to control the bureaucracy is by issuing executive orders. So, executive orders can go out to agencies, or professional aides can pass the word, hey, the president was wondering if. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that executive orders have the power of law. They can be challenged in the court, but they do have the power of law, immediate power of law. And then tinkering with the agency's budget, that's a big way they can play a role in it. So remember, the Office of Management and Budget is the president's own final authority on any agency budget. Office of Management and Budget works for the president, does not work for Congress. So keep that in mind. Congress, of course, has its own appropriations for funds and its own way of influencing the budget. But the Office of Management and Budget is the president's. All right, and then the last fourth thing, they can reorganize the agency. So one example is President Reagan. He promised to abolish the Department of Energy. Oh my gosh, it's end of the day on Friday, and the Department of Education, but he didn't succeed. And this was largely because each was in the hands of people who had been doing those jobs for a really long time, and what we call an entrenched bureaucracy. And that was backed by elements in Congress and strong constituent groups. People didn't want to get rid of these. Reagan had his own beliefs for why he thought that would be good, but people were like, "Oh no, we're not going to do that," and so it's hard. So there is some reorganization within that, but that can be a tough thing. Okay, so Congress. How does Congress try to influence or control bureaucracy? So they can find a big bureaucracy kind of a good thing, a friendly thing, because big government provides services to their constituents, and that's the best way they have of getting reelected, is by making their people happy. But on the other hand, okay, so sorry. Okay, I'm just looking and I'm like, oh my God, it's like repeating the same thing. But okay, so I've got a few things, but I just want to kind of go this first. Okay, so on the other hand, Congress has found it hard to control the government and just help create. So how does it try to control it when it's kind of gotten so big? So a couple things. So we're on this part here. So sorry, I got a little off my script. It's Friday. All right, so how do they do that? So they try to influence the appointment of agency heads. So sometimes the Senate has to approve these appointments, and sometimes they don't, but they can still be influential. They can still recommend people or whatnot, and that can play a role. They also will tinker with the agency's budget. It's funny they use the word tinker. I've been using that word a lot lately. I tinker in my barn until the sun goes down. I just do things in my barn. But they just mess around with the budget. They have the power of the purse, keep that in mind. And so that's kind of been their weapon for controlling bureaucratic behavior. They also can hold hearings. So they can do this. Committees and subcommittees can hold periodic hearings as part of their job. They have oversight. They're allowed to do that. They want more information. And that could be a scary thing. It could be a good thing, but it also could be kind of scary. And then rewriting the legislation or making it more detailed. So Congress can write new or more detailed legislation to limit bureaucratic discretion and make its instructions clearer. So if things aren't happening, they can do it. Okay, the other day I mentioned iron triangles. I told you guys this is a new term. So I've been doing my best job I can on this part here. It's interesting because it doesn't come up in the regular civics class at all, but here it is all over AP Gov. So let's learn about it. Let's know it. All right. So when agencies, here's the basic definition. I gave this to you the other day, but when agencies, groups, and committees all depend on one another and are in close, frequent contact, they are forming iron triangles. And iron triangles are another way to think of them are sub-government. Okay, and then I have a note here just that if you also maybe want to go back and look at chapter 10, it's mentioned in chapter 10. All right. So iron triangles have dominated some areas of domestic policymaking by combining internal consensus with a virtual monopoly on information in their area. So they're working together within those little groups to come up with one plan, and they're going to then try to monopolize or control the information coming out about that topic. They're characterized by a mutual dependency, which means they need each other in order to work, and they're going to provide key services. Each part of the triangle provides key services, information, or policy for the others. Okay, that's just an important thing to keep in mind. And I just want to remind you, even though the term is triangle, it doesn't mean it's like always in groups of three. It's just that visual it's trying to give you is the idea iron, really strong. And then a triangle, like think about if you have a triangle on your desk and you're trying to crush it, it's actually kind of hard to crush it because of the way the structure is built. So it's just a visual for you. All right, so the system of sub-governments can be be decentralizing and fragmenting. That's one kind of problem with them. But also one thing to know about them is that it's now overlaid with a system of issue networks and with more widespread participation in bureaucratic policymaking. And many of the participants have technical policy expertise and are drawn to issues because of intellectual or emotional commitments rather than material interest. So a lot of people are kind of getting on board because they care about these topics and these situations. But this opening of the policymaking process decreases the predictability of those involved in the stable, relatively narrow relationships of the sub-government. So the policy expertise and these relationships can sometimes come into conflict. So despite the fact that subgovernments are often able to dominate policymaking for decades, they are not indestructible. So an example could be the tobacco triangle. So tobacco companies working together, different companies that create products for tobacco, things like that. They're going to work together, but then we've seen just the demise of tobacco because of all the health concerns and health problems with that. So that's something just to note is just because it exists does not mean it's going to exist for all time. Things are just always changing. Okay, so that's what I'm going to give you on that. I know that's not a ton. If you need more info on that or more clarification, please let me know. I don't know. It feels a little cumbersome to me, but maybe it just makes sense to you and you're good. And I don't want to keep talking because it's Friday, but give me some feedback on that. And if you need a little bit more, I will help you out with that. All right, the last part, bureaucracy in the scope of government. So the federal government has not grown over the past 2 generations. Now, that's from your book, so we're going to add another generation there too. So past 3 generations. All right, the bureaucracy has actually shrunk in size of the relative population it serves. And actually, I didn't think about that. If we go back 20 years ago, 4 million, what percent of the population is that compared to today? That'd be interesting to look at those numbers. Originally, the federal government has had a modest role. Again, think back to only 3 cabinet positions, and now we have 15. So as the economy and the society of the United States changed, additional demands were made on the government. Okay, again, Homeland Security. They didn't feel that was necessary previously. We had not been attacked on our soil. Of course, Pearl Harbor, but Hawaii was not a state, it was a naval base, so slightly different, but within any regards, they didn't feel they needed it. Considering the more active role in the bureaucracy, the more active role the bureaucracy is expected to play in dealing with social and economic problems, a good case can be made that the bureaucracy is actually too small for many of the tasks currently assigned to it. So, for example, your book is giving examples like illicit drugs or the protection of the environment. So, definitely, even until today we do not have a handle on illicit drugs when we're talking about the hardcore drugs, and then even just thinking about how marijuana and views on marijuana have changed, and the bureaucracy surrounding marijuana has changed. But we haven't gotten that fixed in the environment. We saw that, figured that all out as well. So definitely just kind of keeping in mind in terms of scope of government, just thinking of government as a whole and all the things and all the people it helps out. Just kind of keep that in mind. It really hasn't grown um, in proportion to that. Okay, I'm stopping. Yay! Let me know. I'm happy to follow up. I know it's going to be the weekend. Let me know. Text me on Remind if you have a question or need follow up. Thanks.